You're watching DDI India Newshour. I'm Sakal Bhatt, and let's move on to some other big stories we are tracking. Ahead of the much-awaited and hyped presidential candidates Trump-Harris debate, which is scheduled for 10th of September, Donald Trump is facing a revised federal indictment on accusing him of illegally trying to overturn his 2020 election loss. The prosecutors have narrowed their approach following US Supreme Court ruling that provides broader immunity to former presidents from criminal prosecution. Shalini Puri gets us more in this report that follows.
Donald Trump faced a revised federal indictment accusing him of illegally trying to overturn his 2020 election loss. This indictment, like the initial one, accuses Trump of a multi-part conspiracy to block the certification of his election defeat to Biden. It retains allegations Trump pressured then Vice President Mike Pence to use his role presiding over the congressional certification of the election on January 6, 2021 to reject electoral votes from battleground states Trump lost.
The four key components of the case against the former president have not changed. It's more a matter of emphasis and evidentiary support.
The revised indictment no longer includes allegations that Trump shot to pressure the United States. The Justice Department tried to overturn his election defeat, an apparent effort to keep the prosecution alive after the High Court found that Trump could not be prosecuted for that conduct. It exercises a reference to Jeffrey Clark, a senior Trump administration Justice Department official who allegedly shot to aid his attempts to undermine the election results as a co-conspirator, and to former US Attorney General Bill Barr, who allegedly told Trump his claims of widespread voter fraud were not true. Former President and current Republican nominee Donald Trump aggressively stepped up his social media effort. On Truth Social post, he said, and I quote, "In an effort to resurrect a dead witch hunt in Washington, D.C., in an act of desperation and in order to save face, the illegally appointed special counsel, deranged Jack Smith, has brought a ridiculous new indictment against me, which has all the problems of old indictment and should be dismissed immediately. His Florida document hoax case has been completely dismissed. This is merely an attempt to interfere with the election and distract the American people from the catastrophes Kamala Harris has inflicted on our nation, like the border invasion, migrant crime, rampant inflation, the threat of World War III, and more." Donald Trump's running mate J.D. Vance said that the conspiracy charge against Trump was an attempt to interfere in the upcoming November 5 election.
Well, I think just my pushback on what they said is, look, if the president doesn't have some level of immunity in how he conducts his office, in the same way that judges have to have immunity, police officers have to have immunity, there has to be some recognition that people can't be sued for doing their job. And, you know, the way that I think about it is try to make this nonpartisan.
The revised indictment focuses on Trump's role as a political candidate seeking re-election, rather than as the president at the time. Bureau Report, DD India.
Nick Harper joins us live from Washington, D.C. Nick, so to begin with, just run us through the charges that have been mounted under this revised indictment under the election subversion case for Donald Trump. Would you say bad timings for Trump at this juncture?
Well, in terms of the actual charges themselves, it's very similar to what we saw last time around. The big change is that the language within them has been changed. So the charges remain the same. What they've done is tweak the language to remove any references that the Supreme Court found problematic as a result of their decision of the president having a broad immunity from actions that he took while in office. But undoubtedly it will be a problem, Sakal, for Donald Trump as he tries to fight for re-election. Less than 70 days to go until the November 5th election. As we heard in that report, there has already been plenty of pushback from Republicans who are saying that this is a witch hunt, that again it is an attempt by the Democrats to keep Donald Trump out of office. J.D. Vance pushing back very forcefully, of course, his vice presidential pick, saying that this was all about preventing Trump from re-entering the Oval Office. Donald Trump himself on social media, his platform Truth Social, saying this was trying to resurrect a dead witch hunt. And he said that it was an act of desperation. So it is something that they're pushing back against, but it is a case of perhaps bad timing. It does seem as though it is very unlikely that the trial would go ahead before November's election.
Yes, that's exactly what I was going to talk to you about next. Very unlikely to proceed to trial ahead of the November 5th election when the Republican Trump faces Kamala Harris. But this whole narrative of this re-indictment being politically motivated, so on and so forth, at the time when both are so overwhelmingly, engaged and consumed in this high decibel election campaigning. Do you see this really holding ground in terms of impacting the respective electorate? Or is it just another way of making headlines, but it's not really going to have any impact when it comes to voters' mind?
Well, when it comes to the voters themselves, of course, Donald Trump's base has throughout backed up the former president, feeling that this is a politically motivated witch hunt against him. Of course, the Department of Justice feel differently. They feel that there are legitimate charges to be brought against the former president for his actions surrounding the January 6th attack on the Capitol. It's unlikely to change the minds of those hardcore Donald Trump voters. What it could do, though, is potentially change the minds of the independent, undecided voters, the very people who decide the elections, particularly in those swing states. They may be looking at this and feeling, like the Justice Department does, that there is merit in these charges. Of course, it is a push to try and resurrect the charges against Donald Trump, because we are about to enter the important 60-day period where 60 days before the election, no new charges can be brought against any presidential candidate. So an attempt here by the Justice Department to try and reignite this, to try and get it back front and centre when it comes to making headlines, but also they hope further down the line to actually be able to bring Donald Trump to justice and get him in a courtroom to answer to these charges.
All right, Nick, thank you very much for joining us from US. Thanks for watching.